Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be comparing the Shure MV7 and the Rode Podmic USB. Now these two microphones are similar in a lot of ways, but there are a few key differences, one of which may be a deal breaker. So stick around as we get into this in-depth comparison. Now so far you've been listening to me on the Shure MV7, but throughout this video I'll be switching back and forth between both microphones, so pay attention to the names at the bottom of the screen to know which mic you're hearing at any given time. We'll also be testing out both these mics' XLR outputs later, as well as doing a female voice test here in a little bit. I've put timestamps in the video, so if you want to jump around, you're welcome to do that. Now before we get into the difference of these mics, let's talk about the similarities. These are both dynamic cardioid microphones with built-in USB functionality, so you can hook them up directly to a computer or mobile device without the need of a separate audio interface. They also both sport an XLR output, so if you want to future-proof your setup a bit and think you may want to add an external recorder or a separate audio interface or have a couple of microphones in the future, both of these mics allow an easy upgrade path down the line. They both have 3.5mm jacks on the bottom for headphones, and they both have onboard controls, which we'll cover later. And they also both have built-in mic stand adapters with yokes to make positioning a breeze. Alright, so that takes care of most of the similarities, so now let's talk about how these two mics differ, starting with that USB port. The Shure MV7 was originally released in 2020 and has a micro USB port, which seemed dated even then. The Rode Podmic, on the other hand, has USB-C. This doesn't have any impact on functionality in reality, but when I look out in future years of ownership, standardizing all of my devices to one cable type is increasingly important for me, so I appreciate that Rode went with USB-C here. Another big difference between these two microphones is the physical controls on the mics themselves. For the Rode, it's simple. There's just a single dial here which controls the headphone output volume. Clicking in once on this dial will mute the direct monitoring of the microphone in your headphones. You'll still hear computer audio coming through the headphones, and it also doesn't mute the microphone's output to your device, so it's just toggling between having direct monitoring in your headphones or not. And importantly, there's no way to change the balance between your computer audio and the direct monitoring, what you're hearing from yourself here. It just is what it is. The only way to get that control with the Rode mic is by installing an additional piece of software, either the Rode Unify or Rode Connect apps. And that software has to stay running in the background constantly while you're using the mic. In contrast, the MV7 has a ton of onboard controls that all center around this capacitive touch strip right here in the middle of the microphone. You can actually see now that the LEDs are lighting up with my voice. Now, on one end of the strip is a microphone mute button, which mutes the mic's output to your USB device. And on the other end is a toggle switch that changes between controlling your mic gain or your headphone volume. You click which one you want to control, and then you swipe left or right on the center strip to control the volume. Holding down on that mic headphone toggle will allow you to adjust the balance of the computer audio and direct monitoring. So the MV7 has a win here for that reason. Overall, I like having these controls on the microphone itself, so you don't have to have the software open to adjust these things. But in practice, it's a little clunky to get very refined control over, say, the headphone volume, where for that purpose, I prefer the clicky wheel over here on the Rode. The last thing we'll touch on before we get into the software, and I'm guessing you're already starting to hear the impact of it, are the included pop filters. To put it plainly, the MV7's pop filter is junk. It's a very thin piece of foam that doesn't do much to inhibit plosives at all, as you can see here. The plucky pilot is panicking from plentiful plosives. Shure really missed the mark on this one, but the good news is that for 15 or 20 bucks, you can pick up the RK345, which is the pop filter that comes with the SM7B, and it fits really well on the MV7. So I've got one here, so let's test that out. Alright, so I've swapped that out now, and now let's hear it. The plucky pilot is panicking from plentiful plosives. That's way, way better. I wish they would have just included this one from the beginning. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this one on for the rest of the video, so just be aware of that. Now on the other side, the Podmic USB now comes with a pop filter, which the original XLR version did not. I know it sounds a little crazy to love a pop filter, but I really like what Rode did here with the design of this one. It would have been easy for them to include one of these cheap, big, giant foam ones that I had to buy for the original Podmic, but instead they went with this beautiful design with the plastic ribbing that matches the design of the microphone itself. This helps keep a very sleek profile, and it's very effective too, as you'll see as we remove it here. Alright, so now it's off, and the plucky pilot is panicking from plentiful plosives. Let's put it back on. And so now it's back on. The plucky pilot is panicking from the plentiful plosives. So you can see it's very, very effective. Now let's jump into the software so we can compare how these microphones sound once you've turned on the built-in processing. All right, so I've got both softwares here with the Shure Plus Motive, which goes with the MV7, and Rode Central, which goes with the Podmic USB. And I'm going to go through pretty quickly here, so we're not going to listen to every single sound, but I'll just go through some of the comparisons and contrast of what you're getting with each software. Now, both of them allow some level of granular manual controls, as well as some kind of more automated controls that make things a little easier. All right, so let's start with the Shure mic, and I'm going to switch it over from manual where I have most of the processing turned off, and I'll click auto level, which automatically sets the gain of the microphone as well as introduces some EQ and compression, as you can probably hear. Now, going through the software very quickly, you have the ability to create presets. You have the ability to mute the mic right here as opposed to using it on the device itself. And this monitor mix is where you have the ability to change that balance in your own headphones. So it's not changing the output going to your audience or to your recording. It's just in your own headphones. You can switch it from the all microphone to all playback from your computer, or somewhere in between you can set that balance. Again, that's the part that the Rode Podmic can't do without additional software running in the background. I really like this part. You can switch the mic position. So it's just basically just auto doing the EQ for you. So if you go farther away, it keeps some of that low end. So it's boosting up the low end versus the near. It's cutting out some of that so that they both sound similar depending on how far away from the microphone you are. And then you get 3 tone options of dark, which is what this sounds like now, natural, which is what this sounds like now, and then bright, which is pretty tinny. I would say that both dark and bright sound dark and bright to me, so I do prefer the natural, so I just leave it there when I'm using this microphone. And then you have the ability to switch off the live meters as you're using the microphone in case that's distracting, and you can turn on night mode, which just dims the LED meters on here. You can't actually turn them off for what that's worth. Now, similarly over here on the Podmic USB, there is a very easy kind of basic setup. So if we enter the audio setup here, you'll see that we have to manually enter in our gain. So the Shure, you had the ability to do the auto level, and there's no gain setting here. On the Podmic, you always have that, so you kind of have to manually control that gain. And then processing, if you just turn it on here, there's only 3 parameters, which are depth, sparkle, and punch. And I don't know, there's some Rode magic sauce here that has to do with compression and EQ, that it's kind of putting it all into just these 3 simple parameters, so you can kind of just play around with it and find out you like. I kind of like the default out of the box, but we'll go ahead quickly and we'll turn depth all the way down so you can hear what that sounds like, and we'll turn it all the way back up so you can hear what that sounds like. We'll then go to sparkle and turn it all the way down so you can hear what that sounds like. I assume this is some trebly high-end stuff, and you can turn it all the way back up. And then punch is more probably the compression, the kind of low end kind of radio voice. So if you turn it all the way down, that's what it sounds like. And then you turn it all the way back up, and that's what that sounds like. I haven't found any documentation anywhere on what depth, sparkle, and punch relate to in the real world of audio, but it does make it very, very easy. Just set a quick EQ, get some compression going, and get on with your day. So that's a simple setup on both softwares. Now let's jump over into the manual in case you're someone who likes a little bit more granular controls. So again, jumping back over to the Shure Plus Motive, we can go ahead and switch to manual. At this point, you still have the preset, you still have the mic mute, but now you get that control over the mic gain. You get that same mic mix, and now you get these 4 EQ settings. So you have the flat, you have a high pass, which is what this sounds like. You then have a presence boost, which is kind of like an upper mid boost if you want to stick out above a mix a little bit. And then you have one which is the high pass, which means the low end is rolling off, as well as that presence boost built in at the same time. Now, what's interesting to me is that none of these EQ options get you to the same place that the dark and bright did over in the auto level setting. So it's just interesting that like you have completely different EQ controls, and you can't get the mic to sound the same in manual that you can over in the auto level function. I think that's a little bit strange because if you prefer that dark sound, you can't actually access it from here. So it's just interesting. Note there. So we'll go ahead and set that back to flat. There's a limiter here. So if you're super dynamic and sometimes you shout or something like that, maybe you're a gamer streamer or something like that, you can set a limiter which just basically sets a limit so that your audio will never go above that range. And then you have the compressor down here. And for the compressor, you just get 4 options. There's either off, and then there is light, which is what this sounds like. This is now the light compression. There's medium, which is what this sounds like now. It's getting a bit more compressed. And then there is heavy. Now, again, for this being the manual controls, this is not a lot of options. I'm an audio engineer, so I prefer to have a lot more granular control over that. But I understand who this product is likely set out for. So if that's not you, if you're not a knob tweaker like that, this is probably more than you'll ever want. So it's fine. It's just I don't know exactly what it's doing in terms of the ratio and threshold and all that. So I'm going to switch it back to medium and leave it on there for now, and you get the same meter controls. So that's there. Back on the Rode Podmic USB, let's go ahead and switch over to the advanced options. And this is where you do get some pretty granular control. So you get 5 different settings here that you can jump into. So we'll go into the first one. You get a compressor. All these effects you can turn on or off just like that. With this compressor, you definitely do get the ability to set all those granular controls. So I can set my ratio to maybe 3:1. I can set the threshold to be a little bit lower, which means it'll grab on sooner and compress more, or I can make it higher, which will make it a little bit less compressed. I can set the attack and the release, and I can set the makeup gain after the fact. So if I need to turn up the mic without adjusting the overall gain, I can adjust this makeup gain after the fact, which will bring up our levels to be nice and clean here. So that's the compressor. You jump over to the next window. There's a noise gate. This is something that wasn't available on the Shure software. So noise gate is just to set a threshold where below a certain volume of sound, the mic will just shut itself off. So if you have a lot of background noise or a loud computer fan or air conditioner unit or something like that, and you want to cut out some of that stuff when you're not talking, you can do that with a noise gate. Importantly, a noise gate it's not noise cancellation. It's not trying to get rid of the sound that's around you. So when you're talking and the gate is open, you're going to hear all those background sounds. A noise gate just clamps it down so you can't hear those things when you're not wanting to be heard. I won't mess with it right now, but that's what that is. It works very well, just like you would think. There's a high pass filter, so that's similar to this low roll off high pass that was over here. Unfortunately, it's just 60 hertz. That's all you can do. This is not changeable in this software. So it's just a low roll off to get rid of some of that rumbly low end. I would prefer one around 80 to 90 hertz for my voice. So it's just disappointing that you can't change that even more granular when you have that control over on the other settings here. You have the oral exciter. So if you know anything about Aphex processing, they're known for the oral exciter. That's kind of where that Rode magic comes in when they acquired the ability to add this Aphex software. So if I turn off the big bottom and the oral exciter, that's what that sounds like. The big bottom is just going to be some of that deep kind of radio broadcasty sound on the low end, and then the oral exciter is some of that sparkly treble. So we turn that all the way up, and that's what that sounds like, and it sounds a little flatter when you turn it down. And that's it. There's no other EQ controls other than the big bottom and the oral exciter. So that was a very hopefully quick but comprehensive comparison of the two softwares, so you can kind of get a sense of what they do have, what they do allow for you, and what they don't. Both of these, the processing happens inside the microphones. That's the big advantage of having a USB microphone. You plug a USB cable in, you set this stuff up once, and then it's just there. And so every time you plug that microphone in, you're going to get all this processing to come right along with it. So there's no extra intensive processing needed on your computer side. You get everything built in. So I really like that about both these microphones. All right, so that's it for the software comparison. Now let's jump into listening to both these microphones with the XLR ports on the back. Okay, so now you're listening to both of these mics plugged in via their XLR jacks. And I've got both of these microphones running to the Rodecaster Pro 2 with all processing turned off. So you're just hearing the mics themselves. It's important to note to match outputs, I had to set the Rode Podmic gain to about 55 dB, while the Shure MV7 is set to 50 dB. So the Rode is certainly a little more gain hungry, which may be important to you depending on what interface or recorder you're planning on using if you want to use the XLR functionality. Now, one kind of interesting quirk here on the Rode Podmic USB is that if you have a USB-C cable plugged in, the XLR will just not function. So you can't record both to a computer and use the XLR to like a backup recorder at the same time. You know, sometimes with the MV7, I've actually done that where I've run 2 separate streams or something like that, 2 different machines, running the USB to one computer, XLR to an interface on a separate computer or a separate recorder. And so having the ability to do both devices at the same time has come in handy. Now, it's probably pretty rare that you're going to want to have both USB functionality and XLR at the same time, but I wanted to point it out just in case. Now, the other little quirk on the XLR with the Rode Podmic is that if you have phantom power turned on, which you don't need, these are dynamic microphones, they're not condensers, you don't need phantom power. But if for some reason you just left it on, it just almost kills the output of the XLR port completely. And it's a little bit weird, a little strange. And the first time I plugged it in, I was like, this is a terrible microphone that has no gain at all, until I realized fan power is turned on. I turned that off, and then it was fine. I've never experienced that with any other XLR microphone in my life. It certainly doesn't happen with the MV7, but there's got to be something going on with the fan and power and the built-in preamp because of the USB functionality that just kills it. And I did reach out to Rode on both of these things just to confirm that it wasn't just my microphone that had this, and that it was, an intentional thing, or at least something that they're aware of. And they confirmed, yes, that is normal. It's nothing harmful with the microphone to have fan and power, but it just won't really work, so you turn that off. Okay, so far you've just been listening to my voice inside this shed studio here, which is pretty well sound treated. I'm now going to take both of these mics over to my wife's office and have her record a bit of dialogue so you can hear how both of these mics sound on a female voice in an untreated room.
You are now listening to the Shure MV7 in an untreated room with all processing turned off. This is what the Shure MV7 sounds like. You are now listening to the Shure MV7 in an untreated room with all processing turned on. This is what the Shure MV7 sounds like. You are now listening to the Rode Podmic USB in an untreated room with all processing turned off. This is what the Rode Podmic USB sounds like. You are now listening to the Rode Podmic USB in an untreated room with all processing turned on. This is what the Rode Podmic USB sounds like.
All right, let me know in the comments which of these two mics that you preferred. Overall, I would say that they both sound pretty similar, but I do slightly prefer the sound of the Rode Podmic USB on my voice. I also really like the more granular control that they offer in their software in comparison to the Shure. I didn't mention this earlier, but one of my main draws to the Rode mic here is its lack of branding. It's ironic because Rode is notorious for putting their name in huge white letters on all their products, but for whatever reason, the Podmic USB, they went very understated and stealthy with their branding. While Shure, in contrast, rarely goes crazy with branding. They went all in with these giant Shure letters down the side. And maybe it's not a big deal to you, but if you're gonna be on camera like I am here, getting rid of any visual distractions like big branding is pretty important. Now, the fact that the MV7 is also $50 more here in the US, plus the fact that you really need to add this $15 pop filter to make it comparable, the Rode just stands as a better value right now. That said, if you want the onboard controls or you plan on using the headphone jack primarily, I'd advise that the Shure mic is the better option, at least for now. And as usual, links are in the description for everything we've talked about here today. So I hope this video was helpful for you, and if it was, I'd really appreciate it if you consider subscribing for more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.